But dust devils danced across the Anatolian plateau, spinning lazy pirouettes over the sun-baked earth. For Dr. Aaron Yilmaz, the heat was a familiar blanket, the dust a second skin. But the tremor in her hands as she brushed away another 10 millennia of soil was entirely new. Before her, emerging from the trench like the bones of a forgotten giant, was a pillar unlike any other at Göbekli Tepe. It was not just the exquisite, almost hyper-realistic carving of a fox, its vulpine eyes seeming to hold a glint of ancient knowing. It was the series of precise, geometric symbols carved along the pillar's northern flank, a language of circles, dots, and intersecting lines that felt both alien and hauntingly familiar. Her radio crackled to life, breaking the spell. "Aaron, you need to come to the lab. Now." The voice of Elias, her head of geochemistry, was strained, stripped of its usual academic calm. The story of Göbekli Tepe had already shattered paradigms. Discovered in the 1990s, this complex of massive, T-shaped limestone pillars arranged in great stone circles was dated to over 11,000 years ago, a staggering 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. It was built by hunter-gatherers, a people who, according to all established textbooks, should have been incapable of such sophisticated architecture, social organization, and symbolic thought. Agriculture, settled villages, pottery, the so-called Neolithic Revolution that was supposed to be the prerequisite for such grandeur, came after Göbekli Tepe. The sanctuary didn't just predate history, it seemed to invert it. The established theory was that it was a cult center, a place of ritual that perhaps even spurred the development of agriculture to feed the gathered masses. It was a comfortable, if revolutionary, explanation. But Aaron's new pillar and what Elias had found was about to make it seem hopelessly naive. In the lab, a converted container unit humming with computers and spectrometers, Elias's face was ashen. He pointed to a screen displaying spectral analysis data. "We've been wrong about the sediment layer between the enclosures," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Göbekli Tepe was not built in one go. It was constructed in layers, with older, smaller enclosures deliberately buried and new, larger ones built on top. This intentional interment was one of its great mysteries. Catastrophic depositional event, a massive, rapid influx of material. And the mineral signature? It's not local. It's alluvial. It's from the Mesopotamian basin, hundreds of kilometers away. A cold dread, entirely separate from the desert heat, began to creep up Aaron's spine. They cross-checked the data, ran the algorithms again, and the result was the same. The evidence pointed to a sudden, violent inundation. A flood. That night, under a canopy of cold, indifferent stars, Aaron couldn't sleep. She pulled up the high-resolution images of the geometric symbols from the new pillar. She'd seen something like them before. Years ago, as a graduate student, she'd been obsessed with the few scattered symbols found at other Neolithic sites, dismissed as proto-writing or shamanic markings. She'd compiled a database, a digital cabinet of curiosities that her advisors had called a fruitless diversion. Now she fed the new symbols into her old algorithm, a pattern-matching program she'd designed on a whim. The program churned for less than a minute before delivering a result that stole the air from her lungs. The symbols weren't just decorative. They correlated, with startling accuracy, to known astronomical cycles, precessional epochs, comet orbital periods, and something else, a series of dates. The most prominent set of circles and dots plotted a celestial event, that would have occurred approximately 12,800 years ago, the exact time frame of the Younger Dryas period. The Younger Dryas was a historical nightmare. It was a sudden, brutal return to Ice Age conditions that lasted for over 1,000 years, just as the world was warming. The cause was one of geology's great debates. One of the leading theories, a catastrophic extraterrestrial impact, perhaps a fragmented comet striking the North American ice sheet, triggering firestorms, mega tsunamis, and a centuries-long nuclear winter. Aaron's mind, trained for decades in cautious academic deduction, began making terrifying, heretical connections. The geometric symbols were a warning. The rapid burial of Göbekli Tepe wasn't ritual, it was preservation. The alluvial sediment, it was the debris of a world-drowning flood, the hydrological aftermath of a cosmic impact. Göbekli Tepe wasn't a temple that sparked a revolution. It was a library, an ark of knowledge, a message in a bottle from a world that already knew the script of catastrophe. This was the heart of the Göbekli Tepe reset theory. She imagined them not as primitive hunter-gatherers, but as survivors, the remnants of a more sophisticated, perhaps entirely different pre-Younger Dryas culture. A culture that had read the heavens, seen the danger coming, and understood the fragility of their world. They wouldn't have had time to save cities or empires. Their priority would have been to save knowledge. How do you preserve the core of what you know for a future species that will have been reduced to basics, that will have to start from scratch? You carve it in stone, the most durable medium imaginable. You encode the lessons of your demise not in words, which would be forgotten, but in universal symbols, animals representing constellations, geometric patterns representing time and catastrophe. You build a sanctuary to this knowledge, a North Star for a future civilization, and you bury it, hoping the earth itself will protect it until the world is green again, and a new humanity is ready to find it. The animals on the pillars weren't just gods or totems, they were mnemonics. The vulture wasn't a death symbol, it was a reminder of the stench of mass extinction, and its ability to soar high might represent the celestial origin of the disaster. The fox, cunning and adaptable, a lesson in survival. The scorpion, the poisonous aftermath, the changed world. The next weeks were a fever dream. Erin and her small trusted team worked in secret, their excitement curdled by a pervasive fear. They found more evidence. Seismic surveys revealed vast, unnatural voids deep beneath the main tell, possible storage chambers yet to be excavated. Carbon dating of the newly uncovered pillar placed it as the oldest yet, right at the cusp of the Younger Dryas boundary. The theory gained a terrifying coherence. Göbekli Tepe was a reset switch. The survivors of the cataclysm, the Göbekli people, had built this place as a repository. They had then likely integrated with or taught the scattered bands of hunter-gatherers who had survived the catastrophe, seeding the knowledge that would eventually blossom into agriculture, animal husbandry, and settled life. They weren't primitive ancestors stumbling toward civilization. They were enlightened teachers, guiding their children out of the ashes. But the message was dual purpose. It was both a seed for regrowth and a stark, stone-etched warning. This has happened before. Erin presented her findings to a closed-door meeting of the project's backers and a select few officials from the Ministry of Culture in Ankara. The presentation, held in a sterile conference room, felt surreal. She showed them the spectral analysis, the astronomical correlations, the seismic data. She laid out the reset theory with a calm she did not feel. The silence that followed was profound. Then, it broke into two distinct reactions. Some were enthralled, their worldview shattered in the most exhilarating way possible. Others, particularly the senior officials, were horrified. Their faces were masks of stony opposition. An older, eminent historian from Ankara University was the first to speak, his voice dripping with condescension. "Dr. Yilmaz, this is a fascinating work of science fiction. You are connecting dots that exist in different universes. To suggest that a bunch of Paleolithic shamans had a deeper understanding of astronomy than we do is not just absurd, it is arrogant. It diminishes human progress." A ministry official followed, his concerns more pragmatic and far more frightening. "You are talking about rewriting not just history, but our identity, the origins of the Turkish people, of all peoples. This kind of speculative fantasy could be co-opted by nationalists, by conspiracy theorists, by every fringe group on the planet. The site is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, not a backdrop for your Indiana Jones narrative. This discussion is over." She was ordered to cease this line of inquiry immediately. Her funding was threatened. Her data was to be handed over. The message was clear. Some truths are too disruptive to be uncovered. Dejected and furious, Erin returned to the site. That evening, she stood at the edge of the main excavation, looking down at the great stone rings, their shadows stretching long in the setting sun. They no longer looked like archaeological remains. They looked like a machine, a silent, patient engine of truth that had waited for 12 millennia to be restarted. She thought about the builders. They had faced the end of their world. They had carved their warning in stone, a scream into the future, trusting that a curious mind would eventually hear it. They had fought oblivion itself, and she was being asked to stop because it was politically inconvenient. As the last light bled from the sky, a resolve hardened within her. They had buried their knowledge to protect it from the catastrophe. Now she would have to protect it from the modern world. She wouldn't publish. Not yet. She would become like them, a guardian. She would continue her work in secret, piece by piece, assembling the proof until it was too overwhelming to ignore. She looked at the fox on the newly exposed pillar. Its stone eyes seemed to meet hers. It was no longer a relic from the past. It was a colleague, a co-conspirator in a project that spanned millennia. The wind picked up, whistling through the excavated pillars, and for a moment, it sounded like a voice, faint and ancient, carrying a single, unmistakable message across the vast gulf of time. Remember. Human history had not begun at Göbekli Tepe. It had simply reset there, and Dr. Erin Yilmaz now understood that her dig was not an excavation, but the long-awaited response to a message carved in stone, a message that had finally found its reader. The sanctuary had done its job. The reset was over. It was time for the world to remember what it had forgotten.